Hey everybody, welcome back to the Looney Bin. My name is Looney and welcome to the HD era of the Looney Bin, where I finally got a new camera. And yeah, look at me, I'm high definition, I'm crispy, I'm clear as much as possible. The lighting isn't terrible, the lighting isn't being all weird, and I don't look a little blurry. No longer 144p Looney, and yeah, this is going to be fun. I'm glad I was able to finally get a new camera, a new much clearer camera to make videos for you guys. And of course, the first video I want to make is of course a Final Fantasy VII video, where I want to go over the three most important sequences or scenes in Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 that will essentially make or break the Final Fantasy VII Remake project. There's many scenes in the second and third disc of Final Fantasy VII that we can go through and talk about, like how important it will be to the overall story that they are trying to portray with the Final Fantasy VII Remake project. Now, understand that my personal belief is that they are trying to essentially create the ultimate version of Final Fantasy VII that they were never able to accomplish back in 1997 because of the technology and the limitations that they had. And this is essentially their, full-blown culmination and the final version of the story that they always wanted to tell. So by doing that, I don't expect anything to change based off what the OG story was, meaning that a scene like Aerith coming back to life essentially will be one of those scenes that I want to talk to you about today, but essentially scenes that were in the original OG that will essentially make or break the entire remake project, depending on how they handle these situations. Because at the end of the day, they are going to have these sequences within the game, but there might be some small changes, some new additions, maybe some subtractions as well. But for the most part, the core elements of these sequences will be in the game, and essentially these are the three most important scenes that will happen in part 3 that will either make or break the Final Fantasy VII Remake project for everybody. So the first scene I want to talk about, and there's no really any sort of like major order to this list, like from most important to the least important, it's none of that. But I do want to go over at least, first the most important sequence, I think, in Final Fantasy VII Part 3 and all of Final Fantasy VII, which is the live stream sequence. I made several videos about the live stream sequence and its importance, as well as why I don't think there's going to be any huge change like adding new characters into the live stream sequence. You can go and watch those videos if you wish to hear my opinion on those. But for the most part, the live stream sequence is essentially the most important sequence in Final Fantasy VII. It will be the most important sequence in Final Fantasy VII Part 3 Remake, wherever the title is going to be. And the reason being is that it's essentially the character conclusion for both Cloud and Tifa. This doesn't mean that that's how Final Fantasy VII is going to end, but essentially you finally get to meet the real Cloud. The real Cloud that's been hiding all this time under this fake soldier persona that he has invented for himself because he couldn't handle, the grief of seeing Zack die and then seeing Aerith die. From based off what we know from the ending of Rebirth, there's going to be some added new stuff that, includes maybe Stargazer Heights, the place where Cloud lived while he was in the Sector 7. Essentially it's going to include more things. People have been seeing these new places in the live stream sequence that Tifa goes through, and more than likely they're going to play an important role in the live stream sequence, such as going to be the additions that we're going to see. But eventually the entire sequence is all about finding the real Cloud, and Tifa is going to be there to try to find the real Cloud. I'm curious on how they're going to change this sequence up, but I think for the most part it's going to stay the same, with Tifa finding and learning about the real Cloud, about all the issues he has in terms of his confidence and why he became and created this fake soldier persona where it was the influence of Genova and stuff like that. And eventually Tifa will rescue and the real Cloud will finally emerge after everything that they go through within a live stream sequence. They could add other things such as having like a Tifa versus Sephiroth fight in the live stream sequence. They could have something like that. I don't know how plausible that will be, right? But again, they are going to do some changes to it. But I think the core of that sequence will still remain the same. It will be a moment for Cloud and Tifa because this is essentially how their character arcs get resolved in a way, because we know as playing through Rebirth that there's issues with the memories and like them conflicting with each other and Sephiroth's influence and people trying to bring out, Cloud out of this hold that Sephiroth has on him, that really you go through the Gungaga sequence and all that, and it's all going to come to the conclusion, a life sequence where finally Tifa is going to find the real Cloud and bring him back, and they will go on to then eventually defeat Sephiroth, and so that, Holy can activate, but then will fail, and then Aerith essentially, summons the life stream to save the planet. It will probably go that way simply because they are following most of the core beats of Final Fantasy VII, so I do not see it changing or doing anything huge in regards to that. So I think that's like not going to change much, but it is still the most important scene in Final Fantasy VII because it finally brings out the main protagonist, and the main protagonist essentially uses this, comeback to defeat Sephiroth and then save the world. So that's why the life sequence, I think, is going to be the most important thing that will happen in Remake. And if they are able to successfully make it, even with additions, to be like another level, especially with the preview we just get from Gaga in Rebirth, it's going to be such an amazing sequence that I think everyone's going to be really, really happy with. Right, so that is definitely one of, if not the major sequence that will make or break Final Fantasy VII Part 3 Remake Project, right? The second sequence is more of probably something that will happen early on in Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, and that is the North Crater sequence. This is a sequence that happens like around the time, I believe, after, Aerith loses her life in the altar, where they go up to the north, where they go to the North Crater, and essentially that's where they confront Sephiroth, and all this stuff happens where Cloud gives the black material to Sephiroth then comes back, the weapons emerge from underneath the planet, and start creating and causing chaos, right? And I think this is going to be a huge sequence in Final Fantasy VII Part 3, because it's going to depend on how impactful they make this, because you cannot have this scene and then have the life stream sequence, right? You need this scene. This scene is important, that leads to the life stream sequence, and with the added stuff that they added in Rebirth, with us not being able to see, Cloud putting Aerith into the lake, right? Or what they're trying to do is that we're looking through Cloud's eyes and seeing like how his mind is trying to erase the grief of seeing Aerith die, right? And it's really just causing all these issues. We see Tifa, seeing both versions of like what Cloud sees and then what the party sees, and stuff like that. All that's going to be important, especially for the North Crater sequence, because this is the moment where everything that Cloud thought, knew, it just all comes together and just shatters. His trust towards Tifa, who Sephiroth is trying very hard to make him believe that she is a fake. That can definitely play a huge part, because Cloud and his feelings for Tifa are going to play a huge role in the breakdown, because all this time Sephiroth has been trying to tell Cloud that Tifa is a fake, that he killed her, right? Why are you believing that this person is real when she's not? That kind of thing. It's going to happen during the breakdown, because that's how you really put that breakdown, that torture towards Cloud, where he finally does have that huge meltdown, right? And then you can also add Aerith's death as a major thing that really shatters his mind, right? Because that's what that sequence does. It leads to the Middeal sequence, where Tifa and the rest of the party find him in Middeal, and he's just really in a coma, because of Mako poison and or his mental breakdown, essentially. So that's why that scene is important. The North Crater scene is that important. He's going to give the black materia to Sephiroth. And he's going to learn everything about all this. The more impactful you make that breakdown, right, the more impactful the life scene sequence is going to be. right? That's why it's super important for that sequence to be delivered, and it needs to make us feel sad. It needs to make us feel heartbroken that this character Cloud that we are seeing, that we have adventured in 2 games, completely breaks down, like just completely shatters, right? Because we as players need to connect with the characters on an emotional level, and the more we can on an emotional level, the more scenes like that create a lasting impact on us. That's why Aerith's death back in 1997 left a lasting impact on people, because guess what, it was traumatic. It was just like, what the hell moment, right? And it made us feel, because we got to know Aerith closely and understand her character and feel for her, especially with what happens at the altar where she dies. It made us feel. The more we feel with the characters, the more we can connect with the characters, the more moments like that, like an actual breakdown, like a mental breakdown for a character like Cloud, is going to hit us hard. And that's the purpose. That's what you want. Because then the recovery, the crux, as many people call it, the life sequence, it creates that and makes that even better. That's why the North Crater is in a very important scene, and why it can make or break, part 3, depending on how, the developers handle it. And I think they understand this, right? These 2 sequences are very important to the story of Final Fantasy VII, and it's going to create a lasting impact for us, especially in high definition, in these new graphics, right? So the more you make that impactful, the more you make it traumatic, the more you make us feel for Cloud, the more important the life sequence it will be later on. So that's why these 2 scenes are connected, and why, if both of them are successful, you're already 2/3 of the way of creating a very successful Part 3 remake that would really make everyone happy, right? And lastly, the 3rd sequence is going to be essentially, the conclusion of the whole world timeline kind of stuff. More than likely, it's going to wind up being concluded during while Cloud and Co are heading down to, to defeat Sephiroth. All of that is going to be interconnected. All of it, right? All and everything else that people are excited for, such as the possibility of a Zack and Aerith reunion. All of that will happen either before or during that moment, because that's when the convergence more than likely happens. It could happen in the North Crater sequence where all the worlds converge, right? And then the final meteor is going to come down, because every single other world, is finally destroyed, and then finally the last world where all the convergence already happened, starts the process of meteor heading down to the planet. But all of that is going to end up in that sequence where they go down to fight Sephiroth. All of that is going to be important. That is essentially, the finale of Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. I understand there are some people who want to see what happens in, like, Wutai. Wutai and everything else is all going to be connected. Everything will be connected in some form or way, and it will all lead to that last sequence where they go and fight Sephiroth. Everything will be connected. The convergence of the worlds, the timeline, ideology in the worlds of the live stream, and whatever theory you want to believe. All of that is going to be finally ended and settled right there. It's where everything's going to happen. It's where Sephiroth's going to have this convergence, more than likely. While some people believe that the 7-second sequence happened with Aerith, I think it will happen during that, the 7-second sequence. And then we'll have other moments that people like Zack and Aerith reunion, Zack and Aerith fighting alongside, fighting Sephiroth in another world, or like in the live stream while Cloud and the rest of the party are fighting Sephiroth in their world, and kind of stuff like that. Like what they've been doing like in Rebirth and such. But yes, that entire sequence is going to have everything involved, and have finally that final conclusion where finally we can stop, thinking about what is happening, or what has happened in the remake project, because it has been a long time. We're still, a lot of us are still confused, but a lot of us are still trying to find out the theory behind this, like what is going on. But I think the last sequence, as they head down and fight Sephiroth, all of that is going to be all changed, and that is important. Because while, the whole thing about multiple worlds and stuff like that isn't necessarily in the OG, the sequence of them going down to finish off Sephiroth is. And that's where everything, all the new stuff that they added, will finally settle down right there and come to a conclusion. Now, the question is going to be, how will they handle this? They already have a plan for it. They're already written down. So, curiosity is now, what exactly will happen, right? Who knows? Who knows? I'm excited to find out. But how they handle that moment and how they piece every single thing together in that sequence, in that moment, as they head down to fight Sephiroth, it's going to make or break, Final Fantasy VII. These three scenes, these three sequences are going to make or break Final Fantasy VII Part 3, and as well as the rest of the Remake Project, Part 1 and Part 2 as well, Remake and Rebirth. It's all going to connect, and these three sequences are vastly important in not only telling, the full story, the completed story that they always wanted to tell, but how people feel about the Remake Project. Because I think that while at the end of the day, some people will still prefer the OG because they don't want a lot of this other stuff that's involved, if they're able to successfully piece everything together, people might say that the Remake Project is better than the OG. I know it's a hot take, it's a wild take that many people probably disagree with me with. I mean, I don't even agree with it right now. It all depends on what happens in Part 3. But these three sequences are going to be the most important, sequences in Part 3 that will either make or break not only Part 3, but the entire Remake Project. Because if they don't do it successfully, I think, more than likely, people are going to have a disdain for the Remake Project. Right? Some people already have a disdain for the Remake Project because I know there's a whole shipping community that, really is counting on Part 3 to finally finalize whatever ship, the developers will essentially make canon. I know there's a lot of people who already think that the ship has already been canonized. There's already a ship that's going to be already confirmed in Rebirth and stuff like that. I get it. I know what ship I like. I know what ship I think is already confirmed. But again, it's all up to them. I'm sorry about that, by the way. And it's going to happen. But yes, the breakdown at the North Crater, the live stream sequence, and the conclusion of the final battle between Sephiroth and everything else a little bit before that and during it, those are the three most important sequences. Everything else will be a bonus that will probably add more into like the conclusion, into like what is happening in the world when the live stream and all that stuff. All that is going to be added, such as Rocket Town, such as Wutai and stuff like that, right? All of that is going to be essentially connected to the ending, and we'll see what happens, but those are the three most important sequences that will make or break Final Fantasy VII Part 3. And those are like really important scenes, and I can't wait to see how they handle these scenes at all. Let me know what you think are the most important scenes that will make or break Part 3 for you. And I would like to have a discussion on that. And thank you so much for watching my video. And thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.